Cobrapost has unearthed two more instances where funds worth $575 million were diverted to India by Reliance Natural Resources Limited (RNRL) and Reliance Infrastructure. These funds were part of $660 million raised abroad in the form of external commercial borrowings, which were routed to India in contravention of FEMA. The proceeds of the borrowings were invested in mutual funds as liquid funds and after some time channeled to offshore entities to be finally written off. The modus operandi was almost the same as deployed for the diversion of $750 million. Here is what our investigation has found. On 17 October 2006, Reliance Infrastructure diverted to India $275 million out of $300 million it had raised in external commercial borrowing. The funds were invested as liquid funds in Reliance Mutual Fund only to be transferred abroad to Reliance Natural Resources, Singapore, Pte. Limited and written off. Another big tranche of $300 million was diverted to India in a similar manner by Reliance Infrastructure. This was part of $360 million the company had raised in external commercial borrowing. After the fund was diverted to India, it was deployed again as liquid funds in Reliance Mutual Fund in November 2006. The fund was later siphoned off to Gurok Ventures, a company based in the British Virgin Islands. While the remaining $60 million of the external borrowings was directly diverted to Gurok Ventures. Another tranche of $150 million raised in external commercial borrowing was also diverted to India. This was meant for a desulfurization process supposedly to be conducted at another power plant. Let us go back in time. On 27 January 2004, Anil Ambani announced his company Reliance Natural Resources would set up a 3,500 megawatt gas-fired power plant at Dadri of Uttar Pradesh, the largest in the private sector. The plant was estimated to cost 10,000 crore rupees. In 2006, Reliance Natural Resources Limited borrowed a sum of $300 million in the form of foreign currency convertible bonds, FCCBs, for the plant. These bonds were to be listed on Singapore Stock Exchange. Another round of funding worth $360 million was secured in a similar manner. These funds were meant for building a pipeline to transport natural gas from KG Basin of Andhra Pradesh to Dadri. The project never took off. However, the Adda Group once again saw an opportunity to pull off another fraud. $275 million of the external commercial borrowings was repatriated to India on 17 October 2006 and the proceeds were invested in liquid funds of Reliance Mutual Fund. This was done in flagrant violation of the end-use restrictions under FEMA. After some time, the funds in their entirety were transferred to Reliance Natural Resources, Singapore, Pte. Limited, in the form of equity and preference shares. Reliance Natural Resources, Singapore, Pte. Limited was a shell entity wholly owned by Reliance Natural Resources Limited. Later on, the entire transaction of $275 million was written off provided for in the books of Reliance Power in respect of the Singapore entity in FY 2018-19. What is more surprising is the fact that the Singapore entity does not have any business to show, yet it was advanced a sum as big as $275 million. The transaction involved a potential violation of the money laundering law. Although the Enforcement Directorate took note of this violation to initiate the proceedings against some ADA Group companies, the anti-money laundering watchdog developed cold feet sooner than later and pigeonholed the proceedings. In yet another instance, Anil Ambani's Reliance Infrastructure diverted another tranche of $300 million to India out of $360 million the company had raised in external commercial borrowing for the stillborn Dadri power project in November 2006. The funds repatriated to Reliance Infrastructure were again deployed in Reliance Mutual Fund. This is not the end of the story. About 5 months later, in April 2007, the entire amount was withdrawn and invested in Reliance Fixed Horizon Fund. About a year later, the fund was finally siphoned off to Gurok Ventures Limited for investment in March 2008. Gurok Ventures is based in the British Virgin Islands. The balance $60 million was also directly diverted to Gurok Ventures. So, the total amount diverted in this manner stood at $360 million. Surprisingly, after the diversion of funds, Gurok Ventures was rechristened Reliance Infra Projects International Limited, only to be changed again. The company got a new nomenclature of Oxagon International Limited. The funds raised in the form of external commercial borrowings and routed to Reliance Infrastructure were invested in the form of 360,000 cumulative non-convertible redeemable preference shares of the British Virgin Islands Company. The shares have been gradually written off in the financial statement, and the entire amount has been provided for in the books of Reliance Infrastructure in FY 2020-23. It is surprising to note that Reliance Infrastructure has in its books not disclosed the British Virgin Islands Company as a subsidiary. It is obvious that the end use of the external borrowing was never ensured by Reliance Infrastructure in contravention of the FEMA rules and RBI guidelines. The ADA Group company raised another tranche of $150 million in external commercial borrowing. This came to light in 2008 when the group filed an application with the RBI for compounding of offences under FEMA. In July 2008, the company told the RBI that the money was invested in its mutual fund because the Dadri power project was delayed. More interestingly, while this application was pending, the company applied for its withdrawal in August 2008. It wanted to submit a fresh application by including another tranche of $150 million raised in the form of external borrowing. This sum of $150 million was purportedly raised abroad for desulfurization of flue gas. The RBI dismissed its explanation as well as its plea to include the second FEMA violation while asking the company involved to file a separate application. Under the FEMA, the company was liable to pay a penalty which could go thrice the sum involved. However, the RBI took a very lenient view, and instead of directing the company to pay a penalty of 3,798 crore rupees for dubious foreign currency transactions totaling $450 million, it asked Reliance Infrastructure to pay only the total financial gain of 124.68 crore rupees in compounding fee for violating the FEMA rules. The order was signed on 27 August 2008 by then RBI Chief General Manager Salim Gangadharan. It is surprising to note that the central bank did not ask about the source of funds and the ultimate use of funds. It did not alert either other agencies such the Enforcement Directorate and seek an inquiry into these fraudulent transactions involving offshore funds, let alone seek criminal prosecution against the ADA Group companies involved in the act. According to RBI's 2011 Master Circular on compounding of contraventions, the central bank can refer the matter to the Directorate of Enforcement for necessary action under FEMA if there is sufficient reason for further investigation. You are watching Cobrapost Expose on ADA Group. For more details, please log into cobrapost.com. This video was automatically generated by an artificial intelligence system using Hagen and may contain inadvertent errors and inconsistencies despite our best efforts at accuracy and quality. We recommend that you peruse and verify the information in this video with the corresponding published story on cobrapost.com.